Nobody warns you about the quiet ones. Not the dramatic betrayals. Not the lies you can hold in your hand. Not the moments with a clear before and after. The ones that get you are the slow ones. The ones that look like love. For so long that by the time you understand what they really were, you are already somewhere else entirely. This is Breakup Diaries. Real stories, real people, real costs. The ones that start with a yes and end with a woman finally asking herself why she stopped saying no. It started on a Tuesday evening in my Chicago apartment. Deshaun had made dinner, which he did when he wanted something, though I never let myself think about it that way at the time. He sat down across from me, smiled the way he always smiled when he was certain about something, and said, "I got the Atlanta job. I want you to come with me." Not what do you think? Not would you consider it? Not even I need some time to decide. He had already decided. He was simply informing me of my part. And I looked at this man I had built 3 years of my life with, in the city I had built my entire adult self in, and I said yes. Not because I was forced, not because I didn't have a choice, but because love, when it is practiced long enough without boundaries, starts to feel like it and selflessness are the same thing. They are not the same thing. I know that now. After dinner, I went to the bathroom, sat on the edge of the tub, and called my best friend Tanya. I told her I was moving to Atlanta. She was quiet for so long I thought the call had dropped. And then she said, "Maya, is this what you want, or is this what he wants?" I told her it was the same thing. I believed that completely. I am telling you this story from the other side of 730 miles and one of the loneliest years of my life. And I want you to know Tanya already knew. She knew that night, and I chose not to hear her, because that is what you do when you love someone more than you trust yourself. You mistake their certainty for your own. I gave notice at my agency on a Thursday. My boss looked at me across her desk and said, "Are you sure?" Not once but twice. I told her I was sure, I was not sure. I told my parents the following Sunday over dinner. My father asked practical questions, moving costs, the neighborhood, whether I had looked up the commute. My mother did not ask anything. She reached across the table, straightened my collar the way she used to when I was 7 years old, and said, "You call me, every day." That was all. And somehow that quiet sentence held everything she could not bring herself to say out loud. I packed my apartment in 4 days, sold the furniture I couldn't fit, threw away things I should have kept. My best friend Tanya held a going-away dinner on the Saturday before I left, 12 people in her living room, everyone laughing too loudly, nobody saying what the evening actually was. Deshaun was upbeat the entire time, already mentally in Atlanta, already past the goodbye. He carried the last box to the truck and said, "This is going to be great." And I believed him. I climbed into the passenger seat. I watched Chicago through the window until I couldn't see it anymore. I did not cry. I told myself that was strength. I understand now it was shock. We arrived in Atlanta on a Friday evening. Deshaun carried me over the threshold of our new apartment like it was a celebration. He laughed. I laughed. And then he went to take a work call in the other room, and I stood in the middle of that empty space, surrounded by boxes, in a city where I did not know a single soul except the man who had just walked away from me to answer his phone. Have you ever moved somewhere for someone you loved and felt the loneliness land before you even unpacked? Drop your story below. I want to know I am not the only one. And if this is hitting close to home, make sure you are subscribed. Because what happens next in Atlanta is the part nobody talks about. Belle. The first month in Atlanta, I told myself the loneliness was temporary, that it was just the adjustment period, that every new city feels like a locked room at first, and eventually someone gives you a key. What I did not understand yet was that in order to get a key, you have to knock on doors that belong to you. Every door I had access to in Atlanta, every dinner invitation, every social gathering, every introduction came through Deshaun. His colleagues, his old college friends who had moved south, his version of a life that I was now living inside of as a guest who had somehow become a permanent resident. At his company's quarterly dinner, I was introduced to 11 people. Not one of them asked what I did. I was Deshaun's girlfriend 7 times in one evening. I smiled each time. On the drive home, I counted. I started keeping a list. Not of grievances, just of things I had done since moving that were entirely mine. Choices I had made independently. Things that had nothing to do with his schedule. After 4 months, the list had 6 items on it. 6 things, in 119 days. My nightly calls with Tanya became the most real part of my day. The only hour where I was fully, recognizably myself. Deshaun noticed. He called it living in the past. I called it surviving the present. We did not agree on what that meant. We were starting, quietly, to not agree on a lot of things. My mother had a health scare in month 4, nothing catastrophic, but the kind that requires a daughter to be present. I booked a flight to Chicago without asking. I told Deshaun at dinner. He put his fork down, looked at me and said, "You just got back from there." Not, "Is she okay?" Not, "Of course go," just, "You just got back from there." I flew home the next morning. I sat with my mother in a waiting room for 3 hours. And on the flight back to Atlanta, somewhere over Tennessee, I thought about those 5 words for the first time with clear eyes. And I realized he had not asked about her once. By month 6, I had a name for what I had been feeling. Not depression, not ingratitude, something more specific than both of those things. I was living in a city with my name on a lease and no real claim to anything inside it. His world, my address. That was the most accurate thing I could say about my life in Atlanta. I started building quietly. A freelance client here, a coffee shop that learned my order, a neighborhood walk I took every Tuesday morning that belonged entirely to me. Small things, deliberate things, seeds I was planting in soil I was not sure would hold. When I mentioned the freelance work to Deshaun, he said it sounded like extra pressure I didn't need. When I suggested opening a separate account for that income, he asked why I needed to separate our finances, with a tone that made the word separate sound like suspicious. I let both of those things go. The way you let things go when you have already spent too much energy on conversations that circle without landing. I tried once, one Sunday morning over coffee, to tell him what I had been feeling. The isolation, the invisibility, the slow sense that I was becoming a supporting character in my own story. He listened. And then he told me I was being ungrateful for everything Atlanta represented, that I was choosing to focus on the negative, that other people would love to have what we had built here. I called Tanya afterward and said, "I don't think he can hear me." She said, "Maya, I don't think he's listening." The email arrived on a Wednesday, senior designer. Full-time remote, 40% more than I was currently making. My Chicago agency, the one I had left, the one that had watched me grow for 4 years, had created a position and thought of me first. I read it 5 times. Then I closed the laptop and made dinner and did not say a word. Not because I was afraid of his reaction, or maybe exactly because of that, but I wasn't ready to admit it. I kept the email open in a tab on my phone for 3 days. Reading it the way you read something that is offering you a door, when you are not yet sure you are allowed to walk through it. I told him about the promotion over dinner. I had set the table deliberately, candles, his favorite meal, the kind of evening that says I am bringing you something good. I wanted it to feel like a celebration. I wanted him to be happy for me. He was not happy for me. His first question was, "Why would you take a Chicago job?" As if my career had also been expected to relocate. As if the version of me he had moved to Atlanta existed only in relationship to him, not as a professional, not as a person with a trajectory of her own, but as an accessory to his ambition that had somehow, inconveniently, developed its own. And then he said it, the word that I have turned over in my hands every day since. He said I needed to actually commit to Atlanta if this relationship was going to work. A commit. I did not raise my voice. I looked at him very steadily and I asked, "What exactly do you think I have been doing for the past 8 months?" He did not answer. What came instead was silence, not the processing kind, not the thinking kind, the punishing kind. 4 days of it, meals eaten in separate rooms, doors closed with just enough softness to make the hostility deniable. On the fourth day, I got in my car, drove 2 blocks, parked on a street he did not know I knew, opened my email, and accepted the promotion. Alone, decided, certain for the first time in 8 months, about exactly one thing. I drove back to the apartment and made tea and sat on the couch and waited for something to shift inside me. Guilt maybe, doubt, the familiar pull to take it back and apologize for wanting something that was entirely, undeniably mine. But it did not come. What came instead was quieter than that. It was the specific, unfamiliar feeling of having made a decision that no one else's opinion had touched. I had forgotten what that felt like. I had been in Atlanta for 8 months. And that was the first moment, the very first, that I felt like myself inside it. 2 months after I accepted that promotion, I moved out. Not back to Chicago. That is the part that surprises people most. Everyone assumed I would go home, back to Tanya, back to my parents, back to the city that already knew my name. And there was a version of me that wanted exactly that. The version that was tired and hollowed out and just needed to be somewhere familiar. But I had started something in Atlanta. 6 items on a list that had quietly grown to 23. A freelance client who referred me to 2 others. A Tuesday morning walk that had become a Tuesday morning run. A coffee shop where the barista knew my order and sometimes saved me the window seat. Small things, mine entirely. I found a short-term rental 3 neighborhoods over and I moved into it alone. The first night I sat on the floor, no furniture yet, takeout container in my lap, and I felt something I had not felt in almost a year. Space. Not physical space. The internal kind. The kind that opens up when you stop organizing your life around someone else's comfort and start asking, quietly and seriously, what you actually need. My mother flew down to visit 6 weeks later. We walked Atlanta together for an entire Saturday, neighborhoods I had found on my own, a restaurant I had discovered without him, a park I had been going to on Sunday mornings since the separation. At the end of the day, she looked at the city and then at me and said, "I think this place is going to be good for you." It was the first time I thought she might be right. People ask me if I regret the move. My honest answer, the one I have been working my way toward for 2 years, is no. I don't regret Atlanta. I regret arriving in it as half a person, carrying someone else's certainty like it was my own, and spending 8 months trying to fit myself into a shape that was never mine to begin with. The woman who left Chicago thought love meant following. The woman who stayed in Atlanta learned it means choosing. There is a difference. I am still learning to live fully inside it. Before you go, I need to ask you something. Did Maya stay in Atlanta out of strength, or is going back to Chicago what she should have done? Drop your answer below. And if you have ever left something safe for someone who turned out to be the least safe place in the room, this story was for you. I'm Maya, this is Breakup Diaries, and I will see you in the next one. Belle.